Pardon me, police! Pardon me.
Attention all units, GTA in progress. Please direct parking lot. Any available units, respond code 3. Pursuit of GTA Brickland has just entered Los Angeles Riverbed at Anaheim. Captain Gibbs requests a roadblock Pacific Coast Highway.
Captain Gibbs, this is Lieutenant Reed. I've got the Pacific Coast Highway into the riverbed secure. He's not going to get through this way.
Oh, I'm a wild bull rider and I love my rodeo. I got you now, you dirty rat. You got no place to go. Oh, the walls are high, you can't get by. My boys are up ahead. You scream and shout, you can't get out of this here riverbed. Move over, Willie Nelson.
This is the Brickland to the Buzzard. Can you hear me? Come down and get me. I'm in a box. I'm setting the car in cruise control, tying the steering wheel, and climbing out. Now.
This is Gibbs. You guys back off and give that chopper some room. We don't want to get anybody killed.
That's a print. Cut it. Thank you. How'd it look, Assistant Director?
Looked really great, Dad.
Good. Let's go to work. Come on.
Dad, the divers just found the Brooklyn. They're bringing it up now.
Okay, Kelly, beam us up.
Do you see that, Brickland?
And now, for all you music lovers, it's time for your traffic report. There's a 6... Oh! What is it, Scooby? Can't you see I'm broadcasting here? Pile up on the tri-level, got you backed up all the way to the off-ramp. So, if you're traveling this morning, try to give yourself an extra day or two, folks. Hang on, folks. I've just been handed this important bulletin. Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our regularly scheduled program to bring you this special report. Like live as it happens.
Hey, I'm Dave Despain from Wind Tunnel on Speed. You're listening to Nostalgic Radio and Cars.
Okay, listeners, welcome. You're tuned in to Nostalgic Radio and Cars, and I'm your show host, Robert Rennie. You can give us a Google TAN Talk 1340.com, and you can see us live here in the studios in downtown Clearwater. Don't forget to check out our website, Gulfstreammotorsports.com, where you can find out all about us. And if you've missed any of our shows, last week was 14. This is 715 shows. Now going officially into our 15th year. Don't forget to check out Nostalgic Radio and Cars. Yes, for the most legendary and fascinating names in motorsports and music. Speaking of music, this weekend, run down and grab your tickets because Friday at the Ruth Ecker Hall is the return of Foghat and Pat Travers. Now, Pat Travers was on our show a few years ago, so we're actually going to play a little Pat Travers here in a few minutes. Anyway, what we do over the weekend? Oh, yeah. Don't forget, if you want to find out where all the car shows are, check out FLAcarshows.com. That's all the stuff going on in Florida. If you want to find out where all the other stuff's going on around the country, check out Nostalgic Radio and Cars. Good evening, Bobby. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Pretty good.
Good.
Yeah, you driving that studio pretty good there?
Once again.
Okay. You're in the driver's seat. Yeah. In the push button seat, as they say. This past weekend, what did we do? Well, this past weekend, we went to the Sumter County Fairgrounds. Now, it's not in Sumter County anymore. It's actually in Hernando County. It's still called Sumter County Fairgrounds. No, Sumter County Swap Meet. That's
at the Florida Classic Park.
Yeah, at the Florida Classic Park. Thank you for reminding me. Anyway, so when I rolled in there Sunday, I always go to these swap meets. I say, I'm not buying anything. I'm not taking anything. I got plenty of stuff to get rid of. Which reminds me, go to my website and then follow us on Facebook because you can see all hundreds of items of stuff that we have for sale, mostly Mustang related, but we got car stuff. Hell, we even have bits and pieces of furniture, car parts, construction equipment, materials, all kinds of, whatever comes my way, That's the thing about being a junkyard guy. Now, if you caught the very beginning of the show, Halicki did the original Gone in 60 Seconds movie, and he was a junkyard guy, just like I was, still am kind of, a junkyard guy. And I like the beginning of it because at the if you catch the scene, unfortunately, you can only hear the audio, but at the beginning of the scene, he was out there in the back torching a rear end out of a car, Ford, I might add. And as his manager comes walking around the corner and kind of catches him. And I will tell you from experience that even though I owned and operated salvage yards, there is something about cutting up a car, taking a loader and running a forklift through it. Alan, I'm sure if you're tuned in, anybody else who used to know me back in the 80s and 90s when I had the junkyards and early 2000s. And yeah, you just take, I can't tell you how many cars. We literally had two giant loaders in our yard up in Hercules Avenue. And one was called a Wyndham. The other was a Cat. We had a Cat 930. And because we weren't fans of Japanese cars necessarily, we would literally, now if you remember the old Japanese movies with Godzilla and I can't think of the other one, something begins with a TH, the two giant monsters. Okay, so they're fighting each other, right? So we literally would pick up a Toyota or a Nissan or a Subaru, and we would shish kebab it, and we would run to the back of it. We had like 3 main aisles, and then we had cross aisles. And we would literally have this car on the forks. We shish kebabbed it. And the trick was go back there and try to take the Subaru or the Toyota or the Nissan or we weren't Nissans back then, they were Datsuns. And what else did we have? Mazdas. And literally try to rip them off the forks. By the time we got done, the cars were totally shredded. I mean, it was just kind of hysterical. Had YouTube existed back then, that would be funny. And I probably just gave somebody an idea. But it was like 2 giant mechanical monsters, just ripping this car apart, because we were careful. We didn't run into each other with loaders, okay? We naturally didn't try that. We were really going after the cars. So, if you were careful, and not bang, you weren't really destroying your equipment or anything like that. But that was kind of comical. So, anyway, at Sumter County, I actually met Landry Kelly, who is the son, and then my father, Jerry Kelly, who also run the Moultrie salvage or swap meet up in Moultrie, Georgia. And I got to talking to Jerry Kelly for a little bit, and I did not know don't hold me to it. I think it was late great Chevy, but he used to own, was a big supplier, like National Parts Depot is to Mustangs. He was to vintage Chevrolets. And then he, I guess, sold the business, and then I'm not sure who bought it. And then he came down here and he kind of got involved in the swap meet thing for the last 30 years. But he is an avid car collector. One of the cars that he had was one of the Georgia Shaker, the original Z11 Chevrolet that, God, I can't think of his name right now. It escapes me. My memory's bad. Bobby, look up who the Georgia Shaker was, race car driver, please. And he's quicker at it than I am. That's why I asked him to do that. Anyway, and so he raced Chevrolets until the early. Don Nicholson also did. He raced Chevrolets too. Ward Blazer raced Chevrolet. A lot of guys raced Chevrolets, Pontiacs, or whatever back in the day. And then when they unofficially pulled out of racing, then they jumped ship and they got a better offer from Ford.
Hubert Platt.
Hubert Platt, that's it. Yeah. Okay. And there was another guy up there by the name of Harold Dutton who I met, who was kind of like under the radar, but also a very, very extremely proficient, very fast drag racer who was also Ford. But Hubert Platt, also known as the Georgia Shaker, was a big drag race guy out of Georgia. And so he had one of these aluminum bodied, or aluminum front end, I should say, Z11, X11, Z11 full-size Chevy with a 409 in it and 4-speed. The car was meticulously restored. The trailer that he dragged up there was Arnie Beswick's Swiss cheese. It had a picture of the Swiss cheese car on the side. Well, there was another guy that has also been on our show by the name, Arnie's been on our show, obviously, and as well as George Montgomery. And of course, one's from Ohio, one's from George Montgomery's Ohio, Arnie's from Illinois, and they used to compete against each other back in the day. different classes, but basically on the same tracks. And but Arnie at one point had and I'm going to get Arnie back on the story because Jerry told me I need to get him on there and talk about this a little bit. And even though he's in his 90s, I'm sure he's sharp as could be. A lot of these old drag racers are. And he got one of the original Swiss cheese Pontiacs. When I say Swiss cheese, because the frame had all the holes drilled in it, so it made it lightweight. And the car was kind of, he got it kind of through channels through DeLorean. See all these connections here, guys? DeLorean and Arnie Beswick and some of these big time racers and Hubert Pratt, people like that. And of course, our guest is going to be on the night. There's also a DeLorean connection, and so it's really interesting how this whole intertwines. And what fascinates me is obviously the history side of it. So we're going to get Jerry on the show here probably the next couple of months, just before they bring back the Sumter swap meet, which ceases over the summer because it's too hot, and they'll be back commencing the first Sunday of September. And then of course Moultrie is in the fall, and Moultrie is an excellent swap meet. I mean, they really, the first couple of times I went there, which was probably 30 years ago or 25 years ago anyway, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was totally impressed. I used to go to Daytona all the time, took a ride run, and I go to Charlotte also, right? But I don't know what it is about Moultrie, but you get all these guys from Georgia, from Tennessee, from Alabama, Mississippi, Kentucky, Carolinas, Virginia. The good old boys just come out of the woodwork with some amazing stuff. In fact, he showed me a picture. He goes, "Hey, you know what this is?" And I go, "Yeah, I know exactly what that is." He says, "Yeah, they got Dominators on them too." There were 2 factory NASCAR Boss 429 intake manifolds with 1150 or 1250 Dominators on them, which, that's extremely rare to find a set of those. And some other stuff. So he invited me up to his garage and take a look at some of his other goodies, and I'm kind of really looking forward to that because that stuff fascinates me. As much as I keep saying I'm getting out of it, I'm just, just my thing. Anyway, on that note, let's go ahead and, we're running over time here. Let's go ahead and go to a song, and let's get our guest on the show for this evening. Hey, you're tuned into Nostalgic Radio and Cars. Don't touch that dial, baby. We'll be right back.
Well, some cities life was not there for the pain. It's head out this and line up here. It's all just too insane. I feel the blues are coming down like rain. My feelings are so complicated, I wish I could explain. Turning into words on the way I feel. I know I really need someone, and I need something that's real.
The Brooklyn 3 EV, all-electric 3-wheel vehicle. Luxury 2-passenger interior, designed by race car engineers for enhanced safety. How much do you think this all-electric Brooklyn 3 EV should sell for?
Is it 85,000?
100,000 easy.
125?
200,000?
250,000?
$500,000?
What would you say if I told you the Brooklyn 3 EV will sell for $25,000 through 252 top U.S. car dealers?
I want one.
I want it.
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 Everybody wants it. And that means lots of new customers coming to your dealerships. The 3 EV will mean more traffic, new customers, and real business growth. For more information about our innovative vehicles and dealer programs, go to the Contact Us page at vvcars.com or email us at info@vvcars.com.
Hi, I'm Bob Lutz, former vice chairman of General Motors, and I like listening to Nostalgic Radio and Cars and Semper Fi.
Okay, we're back and you're tuned into Nostalgic Radio and Cars, and I'm delighted to welcome back to Nostalgic Radio and Cars the entrepreneur, the automotive manufacturer, the car importer of the great United States of America, and the P.T. Barnum in the automobile business, Mr. Malcolm Bricklin. My friend, how are you this evening?
Good evening, Robert. How are you today?
Pretty good.
Where did you get a hold of that email or that guy? That's not a commercial, but well, it was like a commercial. That was so old. I can't believe it.
Really? Well, that's the well, should we say the beauty or the marvel of YouTube? They just have all kinds of weird stuff on there.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing how long ago that was. Well, the only difference is we've increased the battery range, we've increased everything in the car, and now it's going to be selling for $39,000.
So tell us a little bit about that. Now, I mean, we started the last thing we said last week was you stopped at. You said we were talking a little bit about Cherry, so we'll get into that in a minute or a little later. But talk to us a little bit about this new vehicle that you've got. This is basically a totally enclosed, similar safety vehicle, well designed, well engineered, safe as can be, but it's 3 wheels and it's all electric.
It is, and it's beautiful, and it's so much fun to drive.
Well, I will tell you this, just by seeing the pictures, it is extremely stylish, I must admit. It's a very, very good looking car. And I also might add that back in the day when you did the Bricklin was also a very good looking car by comparison to anything else back in the 70s. That was a great looking car.
Yeah, well, people who see it today still think it's a car from tomorrow, and it's only 50 years old this year.
That's true. That is true. So how did you get in the car business in the first place? Now, wait a minute. Before we do that, you basically, at a very young age, your father, you were in Florida, and your father had this company called, what was it, Handyman America, which was basically
No.
No?
He had a company called Bricklin Building Supplies.
Oh, okay. And then you took it to the next level, because back then, the only thing we had, Cox Lumber, Scotty's, and a few places like that. So you basically Home Depot'd everybody before Home Depot was even a household name, right?
Well, I did. It was actually a combination of like 7-Eleven because they were open 7 days a week, and that was a very, very new thing. And my dad sold his building supply while I was in college at the University of Florida. And I decided, well, I didn't know what I was going to do, but his name was Bricklin Building Supply, and my name was Bricklin. So I decided, I went out and hired his best salesman and formed a company called Cranus, which was the name of Jack Cranus was his name, Cranus Bricklin. And I assumed the builders would assume I'm my dad, which they did. And the suppliers would assume that my dad was behind me, which he wasn't. And I got the advantage of being able to buy my building supplies at really good prices and sell to to builders that probably normally wouldn't buy from me. So I got started in the building supply business for a very strange reason. And that was, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Now, I found something I didn't like. In those days in Orlando, which is where this all started, a builder would go out to build, let's say, 100 houses. And he would pay everything on time until the last 10 houses. And then he would finish that project, and he wouldn't get paid for the last 10 houses. And you never knew when the last 10 houses was going to be. And I didn't like that at all. I swore I didn't want to be in a business that I had to lend money to people unless it was a bank. So I took the idea of 7-Eleven, and I took the idea of a hardware store that had hundreds of items, and they had big inventory that moved very slowly. So I said, wait a second, why don't I coordinate the punch cards from IBM, which had just come out. Remember now, we're talking about I was 19 years old. So it was in the 1950s. Wow. And they came out with punch cards, and I said, how about if I build this beautiful looking store and put all sorts of items in there, but only a few, only as many as you would sell in 2 days, and make an IBM card for everything in there. And then I had a truck come by and pick up the IBM card and deliver yesterday's sales. So I had lots of items, but very little debt. And I built one, and it was very popular. And then I franchised it. And in Orlando, I had 17 of these stores. And in the United States, I ended up with 150.
Wow.
And they were just adorable A-frames that I was able to go buy the real estate for it by paying 29% down and then having them subordinate to a bank and getting a mortgage and let me build the building and actually put in the inventory for the mortgage. So I ended up with a lot of real estate and I ended up with a lot of franchises. And the person that was selling me the paint under handyman name started really getting excited about what we were doing because we were selling a lot of paint. But the paint was only one, excuse me, of hundreds of items. So let me take a drink of water. Anyhow, he wanted more paint in the store. And I told him, no. The idea was not to sell any one kind of item. The idea was to sell lots of different items and be able to replace them on a daily basis. Well, he wanted to sell more paint. And he said, hey, would you sell your stores? I said, absolutely. Now, at the time, I was about to be 21, and I used to say to my parents, I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm 21. So he said, what would it take? And I said, $1 million after taxes, jokingly. And he said, okay.
Oh.
And I sold my stores. I was just about to be 21, and I had what I wanted, $1 million. I thought, wow, isn't that great? But there was a problem. Now, if I ended up investing that money, I wouldn't be a millionaire anymore. So the money did not do me good. It did me bad. And I was trying to figure out how to get out of the problem. So I became a consultant for a couple of years, and I didn't like that at all. Telling people what to do was not as much fun as doing it. So I decided I was going to move back. I got married, and I had 3 kids. Now, I was doing my consulting work for various people. And one was 5, one was 3, and one was 1. And I decided I want to move back to Philadelphia for no particular reason, but I was born there. I left when I was 10 years old, and I had relatives there. So at that time, my wife did not like to fly, and we had a Corvette. Now, picture 3 kids in the back of a Corvette and a U-Haul behind it. We sent all the furniture and everything, with a regular moving van.
Huh.
Driving from Orlando to Philadelphia. So that started my adventure. Now I'm in Philadelphia. I have no idea what I want to do. I have money so I can live on it. And I was introduced to a person by the name of David Rosen. And David Rosen owned a company that had like cigarette machines and jukeboxes and various coin-operated equipment in Philadelphia, one of the biggest in the world. And he was much older than I. And he got very enamored with me. And I used to come visit him in his office and spend an hour or two. And he kept wanting me to get involved, but it wasn't the kind of business I was interested in. And one day he said to me, have you ever been to Europe? I said, no. He said, well, get a passport. We're going to go to Italy. And what are we going to do there? I've seen something that I'm going to get you excited to be involved with. It's called a Cinebox machine. And what is a Cinebox machine? Picture a large, looking like an egg. In the front, though, is a TV screen and all the dials for a jukebox. And instead of it just playing a record, it played a film, like in MTV, but way before MTV. And we fly over and we meet a company by the name of Vincente Corporation. They were a large company that built these huge presses for automobiles and built the Morris Minor automobiles on license from England.
Yeah, Innocente,
and they were the
called
ones
them.
manufacturing this machine.
Right.
And it looked fabulous. What a great idea, I thought. And so David bought 10 of them. And it comes back to the United States. And the next problem, we need film for the TV sets. It was again before MTV, and they were not making films of music. So I put on my shirt and tie, and I flew to Hollywood and started meeting with the heads of all the major movie companies. And they all told me the following: great idea, young man, but for 10, nobody's going to do anything. When you have 1,000 or a couple thousand or a couple 100,000, then maybe we can get them to start making films for you. And I realized, of course, that made sense. Why would anybody go to the trouble to make it for 10? And if we didn't get it, we're not going to have many more than 10. So I flew back to Philadelphia and I said, David, we made a mistake. He said, yeah, I was thinking about that. He said, I have films we can put in there. There are rated films and they'll love them in the bars. I said, well, I like them too, but I don't want to be involved in that kind of business. So he said, well, we got two choices. I'm either going to put these 10 in various bars that do business with me with their cigarette machines and jukeboxes, or find a way to get rid of them. So I went to a place called Food Fair, which is a large food chain at the time in that area, and I convinced them to put it over the checkout counters and get the people who made the products they bought to give them commercials, with the idea being as you waited in line to check out, you would see these commercials overhead, and you might go back and buy the product in the store. Anyhow, I sold the 10. And I thought that was over. Well, one Sunday, I get a call from Innocente Corporation. When I get on a plane tomorrow and fly to Italy, don't tell anybody I'm coming, and the ticket will be waiting at the airport in JFK. Well, I said, of course. How could I not? It sounds like a big adventure. So I went, I got on the plane, and I flew there. They picked me up at the plane. They avoided custom for some reason because they didn't stamp my passport. Now I'm starting to think of, oh my goodness, isn't this great? It's an adventure. And I go into this big boardroom and they have the board of directors there and they tell me, here's their problem. They make a scooter, a Lambretta scooter.
Yep.
And at the time, Lambretta and Vespa were the big scooters. They were selling all over the place. And what had happened was mopeds came in and the scooter sales stopped. People liked the bigger wheel. I said, okay, why me? They said, well, we have a problem. We have 25,000 of our Lambrettas sitting in a Long Island warehouse, and we're not selling them, and we are embarrassed. It's not a matter of money because it's not that big a deal, 25,000 of them. At the time, I think scooters sold for $300 or $400 a scooter. They said, but it is extremely embarrassing to us, and we have got to get rid of them. I said, and why did you call me? Well, you're American, and you're smart, and we know you, and we trust you. I said, but you picked the wrong guy. I never was allowed to have a scooter or a motorcycle or a motorbike. In Orlando and in Florida at the time, you could get a driver's license at 14. You had to have an older person with you. And my mom wouldn't let me have one. I said, so I don't know anything about that business. They said, well, we need you to do it. And I kept trying to push it away with, I don't know what I would be doing next. And they said, well, wait. Would you do us a favor? And when you fly back, when you fly home and go look at Long Island and then come back and tell us some kind of suggestion. I said, absolutely. And I fly there and I go back. And they have two Italians who speak broken English. And if you want to buy, and they go for siestas. And if you want a scooter, you have to call them up and send them a check and then they'll send it to you. Not the way you sell when things are tough. So I flew back and I said, look, the only suggestion I have is you get rid of those two guys. You're better off with nobody, but hire somebody who's going to actually move them. They said, that's what we want you to do. And I'm trying to push it away. And they said, okay, listen, what would you take to do it? So I'm trying to figure out what is it I could ask for that would finally tell them to buy. So I said, listen, I want $5,000 a week and I want an office in New York and I want a 1-year contract. They said, okay.
Whoa.
Now, this is in the late 50s. No, this is now in the 60s. This is 1967. So I say, okay, they signed the contract. I fly back. Now, I got to go to this New York office they gave me at the Time and Life building and also had a secretary there. It was their office. But there was nobody but the secretary and myself. So I went out and I bought myself an old Rolls Royce for about $4,000. And I hired myself a driver. And every morning and early in the morning, I would come down from the apartment house we were living in with my pajamas and a pillow. I would get in it. We'd drive up the New Jersey Turnpike to the last gas station. I would change into my suit and tie. I would come into the office. Now, what am I going to do? I had no idea what I'm supposed to do next. I had no idea at all about this market. So I'd buy the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and every paper I could, because all I could do is hang around and read the papers. And then it came lunchtime, and I was trying to figure out where would I go to lunch. I don't want to go to 21, but right next to 21 was a place called Toots Shores. And Toots Shores was famous for having a round table in Toots Shores. And on that table, everybody who sat there knew the purpose of sitting there was to talk to other people at the table. So people like the chairman of the board of General Motors would be there to sort of get what they thought was honest information from people. And I sat next to a guy that happened to be a rep for a furniture company in North Carolina, and his customer was JCPenney's, which was right next to the Time and Life building, and his office was right across the street. And this man had a very unusual hobby. He was a police groupie. And what's a police groupie? A guy that has a police badge and talks about policemen and loves policemen and it goes to everything that has to do with policemen. And he would talk about them all the time. I said, isn't this interesting? So one day, about 2 weeks after knowing him, now all I'm doing, by the way, is coming in every day to New York in the limousine. I mean, it wasn't a limousine, in the Rolls, going inside. By that time, the doorman knew me. Hello, Mr. Brooklyn. Good morning. I like that because I remember reading novels about entrepreneurs, and that's what they did. So I was enjoying it. I go upstairs and read the papers because I had no idea what to do next. Anyhow, I go back to Toots Shores. It's about 2 weeks now. And the gentleman that was the furniture rep says to me, I need 3 scooters. I said, sure. What do you want them for? He said, well, I'm going to give them to the police force. They're going to use them for the meter maids. They want to try it out. Sure. And I give it to him. 1 week later, he comes back and says, they love it. They figure 1 scooter is equal to 5 meter maids. I said, well, that's great. They said, yeah, they want to order 1,000 scooters. So we negotiate a 5% commission. I call up Italy. I said I was going to have 1,000 sold, and it's going to be to the police force. And there's a commission of 5% too, and has to be made out to. And I tell them, and they are ecstatic. And so am I. We just sold 1,000 scooters. Well, they are really happy about that. And they start talking to the press about the scooters because everybody's starting to see them on the streets of New York. And then about another 2 weeks later, he says, I need another 3 scooters. Sure. What do you want them for? Well, at that time, Central Park was a place you did not go, day or night. It was just not safe. And they were going to use that to run after people to try to make it safer. Well, the truth is, when you go over grass and rocks and stuff, you really want a bigger wheel. A moped would have been smarter, but nobody was talking to him except this man. And so we give him 3 of them. And a week later, all of a sudden you start seeing in the paper, it's getting safer to be in Central Park, not at night yet, but during the daytime. And they order 1,000 bikes. And now there's a big deal. Now you are safe to be in Central Park because of the scooter patrol. And we just sold 2,000 scooters. Another 2 weeks go by, and he says, I need $15,000. Okay, what for? He said, we're going to run an ad, the Police Gazette, and both the people in charge of the Central Park and the meter maids are willing to put their name and their phone number for the police force to call them up to find out what has happened. And we run the ad, and we're sold out.
Wow.
Now, all I have done is go back and forth to New York, read the papers, and go to Toots Shores. And now we have sold all 25,000, and I have about 9 months left with my contract. So I'm still going back and forth to New York, but I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do now. And I start looking at what was happening with scooters in the world, and I see they're being rented for $15 an hour. But after I look into it, I see they work good for a month or two, which $15 an hour for something that costs you a couple $100 is unbelievable. But they all seem to close up. And the reason they close up is because if you're going to ride a scooter and rent one, then what you're going to do is have to learn how to balance and shift at the same time. And that means you're going to get in an accident. Because you have to try to balance something you haven't been on and try to shift at the same time. And it leads to accidents and nobody has insurance. So I decided this is a great business. And I go see Home Life, Farmer's Life. And I get a contract for scooters rental at $1 an hour. So now I got insurance. I don't have a scooter though. So I look around and I can't find anything. I'm reading the Wall Street Journal and I see an article about a guy who has 450 scooters in Boston on rental. So I fly to Boston to meet him. And he says, I got a problem. I got a contract for these scooters, the Rabbit scooters, and they have automatic transmission. He said, I make a lot of money in the summertime, but then I got to store them in the wintertime. So all the money I'm making over here, I'm paying for moving and storage and all the other stuff. And on top of that, I have a warehouse because I have an exclusive for the country. And I have a whole bunch of scooters I paid for and a whole bunch of parts. And I owe $75,000 to the New England Merchant Bank on an SBA loan, and I can't pay it. Oh, he also has a little airplane because he likes to fly around. So I say, take me to the bank, and I go to the bank, and I say, here's my deal. I want that scooter. You have a contract? They show me the contract. I said, you get that contract assigned to me. I will guarantee the $75,000 loan. If it's not paid in 90 days, I'll pay it personally. Bank says, yep. We make a deal. I tell the guy he can keep the 450 scooters. He can keep his airplane. I just want what he has in parts and in inventory. And I put in the program that I decide I'm going to sell a dozen of each of these scooters to gas stations. Because they a lot of gas stations at that time were owned by individual people. And he had a couple hundred of them. And after I put the brochure together and put the program together with these particular vehicles, which were unbelievable because of automatic transmission, I sold them all out. And the next thing I did is go out and buy a telex. And I said to the guy, give me all the information. He gives me the information. I send off to Fuji Heavy Industries. I want to buy everything you can produce. Tell me how to make the letter or how much I should make the letters of credit for. And I get back a telex that says, who am I? And didn't I know they're dismantling their factory because they sold it to Israel? I call up the New England Merchant Bank. I said, I thought you said you had a contract signed. I saw it. He said, yeah, we forged it.
Whoa.
He said, what in the world would you do that for? Well, we knew they were dismantling the factory, but we knew that if you got involved, you're going to be able to talk them into it. Now, I'm 28 years old. I figure I can do anything now. So I'm not even mad. I call back, I telex back to Fuji, I'm coming over to meet with you, let's say 2 days from now. I buy a ticket, I got my passport, and I'm on the plane. And I meet them the next day, and I'm walking around with a Peter Max tie and double-breasted suits and sideburns, and they're walking around in gray and gray and gray, 1967. And on top of that, there's nobody that I meet that's less than 50 years old, and I'm 28 years old. And they're nervous that maybe they're liable for something because they know I got screwed, and they don't know what kind of liability they may have. Remember, they're 67. Everybody's nervous about the United States doing business there. Well, so they spend the next week and a half with me every day, taking me to a new factory they got. They show me the cars they're building. They show me everything. And finally, they get to the scooter place, and sure enough, it's being dismantled. And I show them the brochure, and I tell them I'll buy everything they can produce. I'll give them letters of credit so they're never going to gamble anything anymore. And they're all listening and shaking their head, so, which I misunderstood. That means they understand, not that they're saying yes. And I leave assuming I'm going to have a contract. And about 2 weeks later, I get a really sorry, but they can't. Israel, they sold it, and they're going to continue dismantling it. Well, I'm trying to think of what can I do now. And the point of my story is to let the people who are looking to what do you do, how do you get involved, what do you do in your life, to realize things come up in your life all you got to do is see what's in front of you and at least say yes and follow it and see if it's where you should be. Now I have everything I want. I can't get now. I fly back there because I remember they had two cars, a Subaru 360 that I could buy for $640 FOB Yokohama, and a bigger car with front-wheel drive that I could buy for about $920. Well, I wanted the bigger car with the front-wheel drive because I knew there was a market for that. So I go tell them, I want to buy that car. They said, no, under no circumstance, it's not ready. We're not selling it to you. Forget about it. So I said, okay, I'll take the little car. Now, remember, they're trying to make me happy because they're not sure what liabilities they may have. And instead of just saying no, they said, okay, but following year, 1968, there's federal regulations coming in. So give us $1.5 million and we'll meet the regulations and you can have the car. Well, I'm not going to give them $1.5 million. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to sell cars. But I figure for that price, for damn sure, I'll know how to sell them. So I fly back to Washington. I go to NHTSA, which is the highway safety. I say, give me a book on the safety regulations for next year. They give me about a 2-inch book. I start looking through it, and I realize there's nothing that I could possibly read that would make me understand anything. But I read the first page, and it says, these regulations apply to all cars over 1,000 pounds curb weight. Boom, I go in there. What's curb weight? Oh, they said it's right there. It's at the curb with all the fluids in the car. All the fluids for the fuel, all the fluids for the battery, air conditioning, whatever you happen to have in the car. That's what. So I look at the brochure. It says 960 pounds curb weight. And I say to them, if I have, and I show them the brochure, the car I want to bring in under 1,000 pounds, how long would it take you to change the rules and tell me that now it has to be over 1,000 pounds? I got to meet the regulation. They said, the way it works is you bring in a vehicle. If we get a lot of complaints, then we hold hearings. And after we hold hearings, if we decide to change the rules, at that point, from the time we change it, you've got 2 years. I said, you mean I walk out of this, I got 2 years right now? They said, absolutely. I said, what do I do? Take the brochure down to the IRS. Where? They tell me. I take it down there. They write me a letter exempting me from this particular car in my name. I go telex back to Fuji. I'm coming over. I would like to meet with the board of directors. If we agree on what we're going to do together, fine. If not, I will write a letter that will hold you harmless from any kind of liability at all. And 2 days later, I fly in. But before I fly in, I had a friend who was over 50 years old that I hired. And I said, all I want from you is you're over 50. You don't have to say a thing. You're my employee and you have some age. So they don't just think they're dealing with this kid. And we both fly over. And we're sitting in the boardroom. Actually, that day it snowed in Tokyo, which was a big deal. So to me, it was an omen. And we're sitting there with the board, and we started to make some small talk. And I said, listen, let's get down to it. I know you're just being polite, but I got to tell you, I'm very powerful politically in the United States. And I know you think I'm full of baloney. I said, so let's make a deal. If I can get the United States government to exempt me from bringing this car and not having to meet the safety regulations, you will give me a contract for this car. They said, absolutely. And I pull out the letter, and Subaru of America was born. Now, if that's not a strange path to get into the automobile business as an importer of a car, there is nothing stranger than that. Now, the car comes in. We start signing up dealers. I still don't know what I'm doing with what I'm doing, but they like the price because the price was $12.95 retail, and they got 20% discount. And we're setting up dealers, and we're buying cars, and I'm talking to banks into giving me letters of credit with the cars as collateral. And cars are coming in, and cars are being made. And Consumer Report comes out. On the front cover, Cadillac head-to-head with this little 360, which, of course, was a joke. But the article was terrible. What a horrible car because it didn't meet the safety regulations, so it's not safe, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, they just ripped it. So I said to the person who sent it to me, so what? What's the circulation? Oh, the circulation is 500,000. I said, so 500,000 people won't buy the car. Now, that's what happened. All the bankers read it, and they stopped the floor planning, which put me out of business immediately with that car. Now, I really had a problem. I had dealers. I had cars coming in. I had to get rid of the cars coming in. I couldn't sell them to the dealers because they couldn't get the floor planning. And I had to figure two things: how to get rid of the cars that were coming in some way, and at the same time come back and get the bigger car that they didn't want to sell me. And on top of that, with this horrible embarrassment as to show my success. Well, I met an investment banker. I made a deal with him about the bigger car, showed him pictures. I said, if I can get a contract for that bigger car, I need $1 million too. At that time, by the way, 67, that was enough money to do what I needed next. So he agreed. And we agreed that his attorney would draw up the contract. And I said, how many years do you want? He said, 25 years. I said, suppose I get perpetual. And he laughed at me. He said, forget about that. Nobody gets a perpetual contract. Nobody ever heard of a perpetual contract. And don't ask me why. I was being cocky. But I said, I'll come back with a perpetual contract on the condition I show you that contract, I get a check that day. Absolutely. I send the contract over with please sign it. I'll be over there. Don't change anything. And they send me back as I'm walking on the plane. I get a call from my secretary, and to go get a phone. There was no cell phones at that time. So I go answer the phone in the airport, and it says, I got to tell her, I said, if you're coming over to sign the contract, as is, don't come. And I tell her right back, I'm coming, you're signing, see you soon. And I fly over. And I go over. Now I have another person who's working with me. So now I got 3 people working for me. And I have some people out in the field that we're dealing with the dealers. And I have a talk with my export manager, Mr. Kikuchi. And I give him the argument about how important it is that we don't let these dealers fail, that we bring them in the bigger car, and they listen to me, and they say no. And I go through this for 4 days. And no matter what I argue, no matter how logical it seemed to me, it was no. So I said, okay, I want one more thing, and then I give up. I want to meet for dinner with Mr. O'Hara, who was the chairman of the board, who had come from a bank and became chairman of the board of Fuji. And I sort of felt he liked me. And Mr. Kikuchi, now Mr. O'Hara, myself, and Harvey Lamb, who was my executive, who ends up running the company, really a great guy. And I start my argument. Meanwhile, where everybody's smoking cigarettes, there's a band playing. I'm getting a headache like crazy because this is desperation time. And after about a half hour of every argument I give that he interprets to Mr. O'Hara, it's always, sorry, no. I turned to Harvey and I turned to Kikuchi and I said, I don't know why I'm about to say what I'm going to say, but I'm going to do it. And I get up and I lean over to O'Hara, and out of my mouth comes disgusting, horrible curse words. Something that if anybody ever did it involved with me, I would throw them out a window. I mean, they wouldn't work for me for more than a second. It's totally something that is, I couldn't imagine ever opening my mouth and saying that to anybody, especially somebody I admired that was important, that was old, much older. And I'm in his face and I'm just spewing out this really not nice stuff right in his face. And Kikuchi is under the table and Harvey is sort of trying to slip under the table. And I sit down and I look at O'Hara and he says, "Aso." And then he talks in Japanese to Mr. Kikuchi. And Mr. Kikuchi turns around and looks at me and says, "You got the contract." To this day, I have no idea what it is he heard or why I did what I did, because it's something I couldn't, if somebody paid me money, I couldn't have done it. The next day we go into Fuji Heavy Industries, and now they're willing to come talk about the contract, and they're okay with everything except perpetual. And they offer me, we'll put $10 aside in a bank Tokyo for every car you sell here. I said, well, if we do that, we all go to jail. Because by that time, Subaru it was public. And they said, and so I said, so don't ever offer me money under the table. That's not going to happen. And then they came back and said, I'll tell you what, we'll give you perpetual, but we'll be in Paris, so we never want you to tell anybody. I said, unfortunately, it'll be on the front page of the financial report every year in our public document. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I got perpetual. I don't know how I did it. I don't know why I pushed it. But every year, Subaru and their financial statement had put this contract is perpetual.
Wow, that's
now,
an amazing
the point
story.
of the whole story, I went from trying to push aside, push away, having anything to do with Lambretta. I went there to go with the Cinebox machine. That didn't end up working out. It pushed me into trying to not get involved with them with scooters. Didn't know what I was doing. And scooters led me to Fuji, where I got defrauded, but kept following through. And because of that, I ended up starting Subaru of America. And I was now an importer in the car business.
Malcolm, we are
about that.
That's an amazing story. We're up against the clock. I want to thank you for, just in case, we're going to have you back again soon, but just in case, thank you for coming on the show. I want to thank all my listeners for tuning into Nostalgic Radio with Cars. Don't forget to check us out here every Tuesday between 7 and 8 p.m. on the Talk Radio Network. In the meantime, stay safe, drive carefully, and love your family. Thank you, Malcolm. We're going to bring you back on.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Great story.
Week to week, day to day, hour to hour, ready straight, deep and wide. Bring on through to the other side. Bring on through to the other side. Bring on through, bring on through, bring on through, bring on through. Hey, hey, hey,
WTAN, Clearwater.
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.
FM 102.3.
Listen.
Piper, the American Civil Liberties Union says it intends to sue over President Biden's plan to enact immediate restrictions on migrants seeking asylum at the U.S.-Mexico border. The president saying of his order,
Today I'm announcing actions to bar migrants who cross